So I'd like to welcome Hank Pitcher on the stage.
Okay. Well, it's hello, everybody. It's very nice to be here, and thank you for that very nice introduction. Winston Churchill said that we make the buildings, we build the buildings, we shape the buildings, and then the buildings shape us. And one of the things that's become kind of a theme of mine over the years and consciously is how much Santa Barbara has shaped who I am, and it's how much Santa Barbara has shaped who we are. You know, something like this building, I've been in this building so many times for so many different occasions, and one of the things about coming to this building as opposed to most conference halls that you go to in the world now is just how thoughtful it is and how beautiful it is. And there's something about the proportions of the railing that you're walking up in and where the windows are placed. And you know, the same architect that designed this, as you all know, designed the Arlington Theater, and how much of a delight that's been growing up in Santa Barbara and telling friends that they should wear a jacket because it's an outdoor theater when you sit inside there. I've lived here all my life, and it gets to be better for me all the time. I really don't take it for granted. So I thought what I would do this afternoon is I was thinking about being here and how close this is to this building right here, which is significant to me. This is a apartment building that's on the corner of Garden and Sola Street, and the great architects George Washington Smith and all of the people that helped really shape this town. Pearl Chase is really my hero. There's also just these beautiful little residential buildings. Well, 47 years ago, I was sitting right there. And I was making a painting, obviously, of that building. And that painting that I was making was inspired, to a large degree, by Edward Hopper and this painting that Edward Hopper made. It's not that well known, but it's one of my favorite paintings and one of my favorite themes in art, and that is sort of people in the landscape, people in buildings, our relationship to buildings, how they shape us, and also just those little vignettes, when you're on the beach or you're driving down the street, you see two people talking, or this small group of people, but particularly two people, and you don't know what they're saying, but you can imagine what they're saying. And there's something sort of really beautiful and poignant, and there's so much emotion that comes out of that. So I made this painting, and these were two friends of mine. This is just right when I graduated from college, and there's stories about them, but they posed for me over a couple of weeks, and it was hard to organize times so both were going to be together, and I could be down there, and I wanted to do it when the light was right. So this was the last day that they were posing. Both of them were leaving town. I had like another hour to finish this painting, and I was sitting there, and it was hot, and I was really focused on the painting, and for some reason I kind of glanced across the street, and I saw this young woman walking on the sidewalk across the street, and I looked at her, and something just struck me, and then I looked quickly back and went back to work on the painting, and I went, wait a minute, I can't let this pass. I can't let her go by. I've got to. What am I going to do? I got to finish this painting. So I thought about it for a minute, and I put my brushes down, and I jumped up, and I was just going to run down the street. I figured I could catch her, and she was standing right there. And she said, "Are you Hank Pitcher?" And I said, "Yes." And it took me 11 years to convince her to marry me. But we are, this is Susan, close to that time. I took some photographs. Well, one of her many talents is designing clothing, and she had a company that designed and manufactured sort of resort wear. And at the beginning, she was the model, and I was the photographer for the line. So this was one of those photos that I took of her. This was taken down at Miramar Beach, where we spent about, I think we lived down there for about 7 years. So that was 47 years ago, that painting. This is a painting that I just finished. The painting is a little, well, it's life size. So it's 6 feet tall. You know, the surfboard is life size. It's just a little bit less than life size. But you can maybe see down here these two figures. I did this painting from my studio. I have a wonderful, I really am a lucky person. I have this wonderful studio out at Coal Oil Point, and this is literally sitting on the back door of my studio looking down. And I've done many, many paintings there over the years. This painting includes, a couple of themes of my work. One is Santa Barbara is famous for surfing. It's famous because it has great surf spots. It's famous for the surfers that have lived here. It's famous for the shapers that have lived here. This is Wayne Rich, who shaped this board, is an internationally famous designer of surfboards. And the name of this board is called the Nightmare. It's the shape, it's called the Nightmare. And these fins are brand new experimental fins designed by a designer that works on the America's Cup. So there's an incredible amount of innovation and science and a lot of stuff that goes on with surfing here. And I've been kind of lucky enough to be a part of that in many ways, and grew up surfing here, and I'm still involved in that life. This is that little detail, and so there's these little vignettes just sitting out there making that painting. I wasn't able to suspend the painting in the air like that. I had it propped up, but that's the view. And as I'm sitting there and as I'm painting, people walk by, and I glance down there, and there was this young woman talking to this young man, and who knows what they were talking about, but it was sort of, powerful enough and interesting enough that I put it in the painting. This is also something that I'm interested in painting, and that is to make it as simple as I possibly can. And I spend a long time, I paint this and then scrape it off and paint it and scrape it off and paint it in order to just make it look like it happened, just spontaneously. And I like the paintings to look kind of effortless, to not make them, to not look like they were difficult to make, but it's just like something that you see. And I've also always been fascinated by what's the least amount of information that I can give to be the most evocative that I can be. So this is a detail of that painting that I did 47 years ago of the two people. The guy in the painting was a friend of mine, Scott Keeney, and right around that same time, he posed for this painting. And this is a painting that's owned by the Santa Barbara Museum of Art here in town. And the figures are life-size. The surfboard, people that know surfboards, we learn about surfboards, they have a lot of meaning to them. So and surfboards in that way are almost like shields. The design, the logos, the color, and everything is very tribal. So if you've been surfing for a long time, you see somebody with a surfboard under their arm or holding it up, you know a lot about them. It's like an automobile. You know a lot about them just by what the surfboard is. And this is a lightning bolt model that Jerry Lopez rode at the pipeline. He was one of the first real conquerors of the bonsai pipeline. But one of the things I've loved doing as an artist over all these years is painting these different designs. You know, like painting the swimsuits. And so this Kathy, the woman here, had this great bathing suit, and I said, well, I got to make a painting of that bathing suit. And then she was going out with Scott, so I had them pose, and a friend of mine had this surfboard. He had brought it back from Hawaii, so I thought, this is terrific. I'll put this all together and make this painting. And again, it was hard to get them to pose. I don't paint from photographs, I paint from life. And so I had to get them both to pose at the same time most of the time. And so during the time of making this painting, they got engaged. And so I painted in the engagement ring. And then they got married. And then I painted in the wedding ring. And then they got divorced, so I painted both the rings out. So I only have, he's been married quite a few times. I only have one other friend that's been married more times than he has. This is a painting I did of my son and a friend of his, not his girlfriend, but this was, well, he's 33 now, so I forget how long ago this was. But you know, again, I've always loved the styles of the time. You know, this was the pair of trunks that were in style that year, and he wore those day and night, you know, for all summer long. And that T-shirt, and then this bathing suit was Roxy when it first came out and was really popular. That was like the Roxy bathing suit. Also, you know, I love all of these stories of Santa Barbara. I mean, and the longer I'm here, I just love all the stories and knowing these stories and knowing these people, these connections. I don't have the painting in this slide presentation, but I did a painting of this beach, and her parents lived up by El Capitan, and they had a classic old California bungalow right on the beach. It's a sort of a private beach just east of El Capitan State Park. And so her grandfather lived there, her parents lived there, she was born there, and they in this little beach cottage, and they planted that palm tree on top of her placenta. So I kind of like that, having these funny little details in the painting. So this is the area that Brad Pitt and his girlfriend at the time bought, that they lived there for a while on that beach. I wish I had a better slide of this. This is another painting, you know, that has to do with couples and, you know, sort of two people. And right about the time that I finally convinced Susan to marry me, I was thinking about tandem surfing. Tandem surfing isn't that popular now, though. It's a small but really kind of extreme sport. It used to be that it was just a novelty kind of thing that some people did and was included in some contests. And tandem surfing was generally some really big guy and a little tiny girl, and he was holding her up in the sky like a trophy. That was kind of the symbolism of tandem surfing. And I was thinking that, you know, that I could make a painting where it was flipped, where it was the opposite, that instead of him holding her up, he's holding on to her, and he's able to fly through the sky and surf these clouds, you know, because she's like Athena leading him, you know, to battle. So I felt like I'm getting married and I've got Athena for my wife. This is another surfboard shaped by Wayne Rich, and this, you can see that it's an asymmetrical surfboard. This was a new radical design. It works. It doesn't look like it works, but it does work. And this is called the Mindbender, is the name of the shape. And this is on the beach in front of my studio. So this is my studio right here. So that painting I showed you with the two little people down below and the white surfboard floating, I did from a top of that cliff right in front of this building. This is an old dovecote from the estate, from the Campbell estate, that's there at Sands Beach. There's a little tiny surfer there. This painting is, I think this is a tall painting. The gallery is always upset because it's hard to move around. It's so big. It's over 6 feet. But and the figure is really tiny. And I like to play with that scale in my paintings. You know, where you kind of look at something and then you come up closer to it and you find these things in there. They're either there literally, or somebody can tell you the story about it. Or you know, it's like this wonderful thing that we all have living in Santa Barbara, is learning these stories. You know, and again, this is Wayne Rich's logo, his sticker, and I get great pleasure out of, you know, sort of painting these things, sort of those details, so that they look, you know, very, very exact, and then having the big brushy sort of strokes of the landscape as part of it. So I was really lucky enough to, I've been going to this beach since, you know, I grew up in Isla Vista. When my parents moved to, bought a little house in the middle of Isla Vista, because my father worked on the first permanent building on the campus there. And so when we moved there, it was all dirt roads. There was cows and chickens next to us. It was very, very rural, you know, sort of extremely rural. And this beach that's now so popular, in this painting, at that time it was like really spooky to go there. I would have to get friends to go there to go surfing, because the beach was covered with big seals and there was no one around, and it was really quite something. And this is, we lived, like I said, in this little house in the middle of Isla Vista, and it was like the little house on the prairie, because you can see in the back of this house, my parents, when they told somebody how to come and visit us, they would say, well, you drive through Santa Barbara and then look up and you'll see the airport, and then after you pass the airport, look for a little turquoise house, because the house was turquoise and you could see it from the freeway. And it was that remote, and from the back of our house on Abrego Road, you know, to the freeway was essentially just fields of wildflowers. And so again, you know, I mean, many of us have had that experience of development around us, and I had a really extreme case of it. This is my mom and me and my little brother. So this is that same view from my current studio, looking down at the beach, and here's my son with the surfboard. And you know, I love the sort of the patterns that are created by the shapes of the surfboard, and all of these sort of exotic shapes that are around. Just he was standing there, and I saw that just happened real quickly, and I thought, oh, that's so great. You know, they have the blue against the white, and then the white against the blue. You know, it's like a little rhythm there, and I included that in that painting. This is another view from that studio looking down at the beach, and this was a couple of years ago. This was in an exhibit at the Sullivan Goss Gallery. I was doing these paintings, and there was a post there, and while I was painting, this blue-bellied lizard would come there every day while I was painting and do push-ups. And you know, one of the great things about teaching at the university, like I do, is I get to know all these scientists and I get to ask them questions. So I was asking somebody about that, and they said, oh, that's what you do, that's what the blue-bellied lizards do in order to attract females. And so it says, if you want to catch lizards, you look for one of them that's doing push-ups like that, and there's all these females in the bushes around watching it. And you can do that. So that added a funny kind of thing to it. You know, I'm there making this painting, and there's this guy doing push-ups. So I included him in the painting. And then one day I was there painting, and I was looking around, and I couldn't, the lizard wasn't there. And I was wondering, well, where's the lizard? Where's my friend? And then I looked off to the left, and there was an egret with So there's all these kinds of dramas that are sort of going on around us, and these little vignettes and stories that I like. This was the original nightmare that Wayne Rich shaped, and this is where that painting of the done from the beach, where you're looking up at my studio. If you turned around and looked in the other direction, the opposite direction, there's all of these sand dunes where the Snowy Plover Reserve is, and that's Point Conception off in the distance. And so I made a painting of this particular surfboard. It was really difficult to paint something that was black, and to get all of those sort of shapes on there. But it was a fun kind of challenge. And like I said, surfboards are very much like, it isn't so true anymore, like a lot of what I find, talking to students, is that cars aren't so important to young people anymore, but for a while they really were, and these surfboards really represent, who you are in the way that a car represents who you are. And the guy that shapes these boards also is a drag racer, and he likes cars, and I felt it really looked like a Cadillac. And it's sort of funny to see that, kind of relationship. This is more my kind of car, more sort of my ideal. I remember as a kid, my parents had Chevrolets. They did a new one every 2 years, and I remember the drive from Isla Vista down to Pasadena, where I was born and where our family was, and that drive. I mean, I still remember my dad. That's when you still drove through Ventura, not on the freeway, and where it was rural all the way. And I remember my dad saying, "Some days this is going to be solid." And I said, "Nah, that's impossible." It used to be that the only stop was Wizen's, along the way. But there was something about that. I love 55 Chevys, sort of the shape and that whole sort of feeling, and I love the landscape. And my mother, my mother had a game that she used to play with us as kids, and because she loved to drive. She loved cars and she loved to drive. And so she would let us, she would say, "Okay, we're going to go for a drive, and you get to tell us where we're going to go." And we would take turns. And we could tell her whichever road to take. And, sometimes she'd get lost, in these farms, or they'd get way out there someplace. But it was so much fun. And then I realized that here I am all these years later, I'm still doing the same thing. I get in my truck, I sort of drive around and find some place to make a painting. Anybody know where this is? Recognize this?
Henry Street.
No. Close. Pardon me? No. That's, this is what it looks like now. That's the Bacara. Yeah. So this was one of my favorite surfing beaches when I was young, and used to be able to drive your car right down on the beach. Haskell's, yeah. And when the Bacara was approved, I thought, well, I better go make a painting of it, And so I sort of did this painting, thinking, well, someday it's going to look a lot different, and now it does. I think that's part of what we're kind of experiencing. Along that theme of buildings, and the stories behind them and the architects behind them, I was in Maine painting. I'm trying to remember where it was. It was just like the most beautiful, bucolic little place. And one of the areas where I painted, one of the things I liked about all the buildings in Maine was how there are these beautiful essential shapes. Those white buildings, the dark roofs, and all just like geometry, And there was this one orange building, and I kept wondering, why is that orange? What's the story here? Because everything else is white and subtle and sort of blends in. And so finally I found somebody, and they told me that there's a law or a tradition in Maine that the lobster fishermen are able to keep their gear on the waterways. And there's these certain places that they've inherited that go back generations. And no matter who owns the land behind it, that's their spot, and they can have their little place to keep all of their gear. And there was some attorneys from New York had bought the land behind this one fisherman's little lobster shed where he kept his traps, and they tried to keep him off. They tried to fence it off. They told him he couldn't be there. They said it was trespassing, and this became a whole big deal. And so there was a lawsuit and a lot of argument about this, and he won. And then he painted the building orange, so that the people not only had to still look at his little shack, but it was orange. So I made a little painting to commemorate it. It's kind of one of the pleasures of being out there, painting on location, is hearing these stories and seeing things. Some of you remember this, the Church of Satan. This was this building is still there. What street is this now? I forget. It's not Haley, but it's Gutierrez. Thank you. It was Vior's bakery before that, the Italian bakery. And, this was a skateboard shop. And my kids used to buy their skateboards there. The people that owned it were definitely not satanic. They were really, sort of a sweet people that owned it. But a lot of people thought that it really was some satanic cult that owned it. And I sat there and made a painting, and over a few days it was funny to hear people talk about it. A lot of tourists would come by and sort of wonder and worry about that. And then what happened was that they were able to actually move into a church just down the street, into a real church, and they're there for a while. Now they've gone out of business. I think it was COVID and Amazon and all of that. But I was happy that I was able to make a painting of this while it was still there. Surfing and the life of surfing has really been a big part of my life. And, when I'm teaching and the students find out that I designed and named the sex wax, surfboard wax, that's really all they're interested in. They're so thrilled about that. Most of you know that this is a surfboard wax, and it is the best wax. There isn't a better surfboard wax that's made. Rick Herzog, who was a business major at UCSB and used to make surfboards and was a friend of mine, met up with this chemist, this Nassau chemist, and they talked about it. And before that, the only kind of wax you could use on a surfboard was candle wax or paraffin, and it got too hard and it just didn't work. And so they came up with this formula that they still have and they've modified, and it is the best. But he wanted to name it, and he wanted a label for it. This is the 70s, and so I remember I was taking a class on Marshall McLuhan, and so reading about advertising and how sex sells, and so I thought, well, we got to do something about that, sex and wax. Oh, sex wax, and so I designed this whole thing, and Zog came over to his name is Rick Herzog, and everybody called him Mr. Zog. So, and I showed him, I was excited about it, and in the 70s, this was like really risque, and he said, I don't know, I can't do that, it's just, he was going to invest all of his money and start a business, and it took me about 45 minutes, but I convinced him to do it, and now he's a very successful, very wealthy person. I get royalties for all of the clothing that has the designs on it, and I think it was last year they sold something like 100,000 dozen T-shirts in Japan. I mean, it's just crazy how much of this wax they sell. Susan and I lived down at Miramar Beach for a long time. This is a painting that for many years was when they were selling posters still in town. This remember Z Gallery on State Street? This was the #1 selling poster, and the company stopped them from selling it because they didn't want them to not sell the same posters all around the country. But anyway, we lived for many years in this house right here, and had well, sort of a wonderful, wonderful time there. And well, there's actually a story that's in the book. This is not a plug for my book by any means, but there's actually a story in there that was written by this kid that the painting is named after. He was living in this house with his mom and stepfather when I made this painting, and his stepfather wanted to buy the painting, and I didn't want to sell the painting until it was finished, so he kept sending his son down with food for me and drinks and stuff to try to. So I eventually sold it to them, and we ended up being good friends. The kid, there's a nice story about it that he wrote. Actually, it's his memories of being down there. This is a painting I did in the Coral Casino. I was commissioned to do a painting from one of the cabanas in the Coral Casino. This is before it was remodeled by the current owners, and so I started to do one painting, and I just had such a great time there. I ended up painting there for a year, and the cabana became my studio. And it was so nice because the owners of the cabana also they didn't use it enough, and so they weren't using up their quota of buying enough food. So they said, "Well, please buy food." And I said, "Okay." So I would go there and stay there all day. I go surfing, I paint, and I have lunch, and it was great fun. And this painting is called Pink Drinks. And again, it's like you spend a lot of time in one place and you see the routines and little vignettes that happen. And these people would come down every day at the same time and drink Cosmos. So I think you can see there. You can see the pink drinks, and they were. I started to know all of these routines that different people would come down at different times and do different things, and it was very funny to be up there in the cabana looking down at all of this stuff. It was like a rear window or something, seeing all these stories. And as I say this, I realize I'm doing the same thing in a way from my studio right now, looking down on the beach. But I can't remember his name right now. The guy that managed the Beach Boys, he wanted to buy this painting, but he wanted me to change the time to 4:09. But I wouldn't do it. And I told him I wouldn't sell him the painting. So, this looks a little different now as they've remodeled it. And again, I painted there at night. And this painting, what was fun about this, as I got into it, was seeing how many different sources of light I could have in one painting. From underwater light to candlelight, to incandescent light to fluorescent light to moonlight, to starlight, and all of that in the same painting. And again, this has been remodeled. It doesn't have quite that same kind of austere Art Deco feeling that it does. But it was a wonderful year's worth of painting there. And then this isn't a very good slide. I stuck this in there. This painting isn't finished, but they built the addition there and put that restaurant upstairs, and I really couldn't. That really upset me that it changed the lines and the architecture of that building. But then I had dinner up there, and I realized that was such a great place to have dinner, and it looked so beautiful and romantic at night, looking up and seeing, people in that warm light. So I made a painting of it to kind of deal with my thoughts about it. And there was I forget what year this was, but there was a big fancy kind of consulting firm that was hired by the city of Santa Barbara to decide how best to market Santa Barbara. And what they decided, which was interesting, was not to market Santa Barbara as a place to spend the day or a couple of hours and buy some t-shirts, but to market it as a place where you could come and spend, days, stay in a nice hotel and go for a walk, and really explore the city on foot instead of just sort of driving in and buying, again, a souvenir and leaving. So, and they wanted an image to use. I guess they would for these conventions that they would have. And anyway, I did this painting for them, and it's a big painting. It's, it's not as big as, it's about as big as it's projected right here. And it was great fun to make the painting. And I had this idea that, Santa Barbara is, well, it has, that almost everything grows here. And I like this idea of this tree, the Canary Island date palms, the Phoenix canariensis, that kind of shading, or the city is under this umbrella of this exotic and beautiful tree. And I love the way they look when they're pruned. And but the thing that was fun about making this painting, was that I had to move the buildings around, to make the painting look right. And most people didn't notice it, but then some people go, oh, wait, what? And sort of try to, wait a minute, that's not there. It's really disorienting to them. And so, one of the things, again, that we're so fortunate about, and you all know this, it's like from Point Conception to Santa Barbara, we have this beach that runs east-west instead of north-south, and it's, there are so many stories and so much that goes on sort of geologically, and the flora and fauna and everything. Tanya Atwater, the famous geologist at UCSB who discovered, or really developed, the whole theory of plate tectonics, believes now that, when you drive through Oxnard and then hit the Santa Monica Mountains, how abrupt and odd that seems, that transition, when you go up the mountains there. And then also when you go up to Gaviota, or you go right up to Point Conception, there's a place there where that transition seems abrupt too. And she's pretty much demonstrated that there was a piece of land that turned 180 degrees, as the plates had moved. And so that's why there is that sort of, they belong the other way. Anyway, so this is when you take the train north and you look up. This is the back of Point Conception, and that's the ghost house, or the haunted house. I've had some interesting experiences with the ghosts there. This is the, and again, I love this idea that we can, that we can have this experience with these buildings and this city and this really enlightened kind of poetry that exists in a lot of the architecture and the landscaping here. And then also we have this extraordinary other places, that are so close, where we can be in a natural landscape, a still natural landscape. I was in St. Andrews a couple of years ago painting, and that landscape is so beautiful out there. My son came to visit me, and we were talking about it, and he said, Dad, you've got to realize that nothing that you're looking at is natural. Everything here that you're looking at has been, moved and manipulated. And you got these stone walls, and everything's, this for centuries and centuries and centuries. We still have some areas where the land hasn't been manipulated that much, and there's something significant about being there. This is after one of the big storms, like a crazy bloom on the sand dunes up there, that I painted. And again, that's sort of the ghost house. There used to be a giant Victorian house on the top where the lighthouse keepers lived, and that was torn down when they deactivated the lighthouse. It's a shame. This is what the sand dunes look like, looking east. It's a kind of a mystical, visionary sort of landscape, and I love that within a short driving distance I can make a painting of a building like the Coral Casino, and then go up and paint this sort of wild. There's a name for these sand dunes that one of the geologists at UCSB told me about. That's very rare. It's a cut off something or other, where a big point sticks out and these sand dunes form inside of that. And it's a rare kind of habitat. this is right about now. This is so. If you stand up there, top, and look down, that's what you see. And again, it's this wonderful connection to Edward Hopper. You know, it's sort of that same vintage of lighthouse and lighthouse buildings that you see in Hopper's paintings. And, you know, all of this now is not, there's the ice plant and these different aloes and succulents that were planted to stabilize the soil. But when, I don't know the name of that particular one, but, you know, that blooms this time of the year, and that fluorescent kind of color is really extraordinary. And it was a fun challenge to paint that. This is the view looking, again, looking east. And so my studio, where I showed you that painting of the yellow surfboard, the Mindbender, that's right there. So really my whole life kind of has been spent looking from here over there and looking from there back here. And, you know, I'm going to keep doing it as long as I can stand up. So I'm happy to answer any sort of questions if you have any. And